pies, con los pies, con los pies. Todo el mundo con los pies, 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 con los pies. We are live. You'll see everything. B channel. Yes, we're live. Let's go. Another day. We are blessed to be alive. Yeah. Fuck. Gotta make sure I'm in the right place. You know? Watch now. Making sure all the platforms are live. So make sure, you know. Yeah, just that I'm live. The dashboard. And there you go. Alright, we are live, finally. Let's see if I can hear. Yeah, we're live. Alright, so that's good. Yes, that's good. So we're gonna get into some new content today, and we have 2 more days. We have 2 more days for the 2 days, and we will have a monologue of a story about me going to a mountain and my whole experience to going to a mountain because it was pretty awesome, pretty cool too. All right, watch later and let's get started. You know.
Black Friday deals start now. Save up to $1,000 on special deals during Raymore Flanagan's early Black
Evil.
All right, so we'll be watching the most evil people you've never heard of by chat history.
People you've never heard of. They say that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. A quote that perfectly describes Vasily Blokhin, the deadliest executioner in known human history. Blokhin got his first taste for blood after joining the Red Army during the events of World War I. Over the years, he became the perfect soldier. One who is able to perform tasks effectively, efficiently, and without hesitation. This of course really accelerated Blokhin's military career, as in 1921 he was recruited into the Soviet secret police organization known as the NKVD. One bonus on his extensive resume was his innate ability to remain emotionally numb when carrying out acts of violence. He simply saw it as part of the job, comparative to menial tasks like filing paperwork or having to put up with Deborah from HR's incessant complaints that your funny shirt just isn't work appropriate. Blokhin's unique skill, if you would call it that, quickly distinguished him amongst his peers. If you needed someone dead, Vasily was your guy. His work and unwavering loyalty continued to push him upward and onward. In just 6 years, he was assigned as head of a newly created branch of the NKVD by Mr. Supreme Soviet leader guy Joseph Stalin, a branch specifically designed for executions.
You're so good at killing that they give you a whole fucking unit for you to get executions done. That is a fucking horrible human being. This man was a top murderer. But, I mean, it is war, so I don't know. I guess it's still dead.
With that, Blokhin had become one of Stalin's most trusted workers, executing low and high-profile targets without question.
Excellent work, Blokhin. That goes right up on fridge.
During his service, Blokhin had personally executed thousands of people, including high-ranking Soviet officials during the Great Purge, an internal mass execution of anyone remotely accused of opposing Stalin's rule. Blokhin himself had been spared from the purge due to his repeated proofs of loyalty to the Soviet cause, his magnum opus being his involvement in the Katyn massacre. Now, if you've never heard of the Katyn massacre, I wouldn't be surprised. When teaching about World War II, history classes tend to focus on German war atrocities and kind of skim over all of the other ones, especially the Soviet Union's. Despite the German invasion of Poland in 1939 and World War II officially starting, the Allied powers of Great Britain and France didn't really do much in retaliation.
Oi, Germany, you better leave Poland alone.
Oh, fair point, carry on. The big bad Soviet Union had also invaded Poland just a few weeks later, capturing hundreds of thousands of Polish prisoners of war, many of which were sent to labor camps. But in the spring of 1940, around 22,000 prisoners consisting of Polish officers, engineers, teachers, and other civilians were systematically executed under Blokhin's supervision, with Blokhin himself having personally executed over 7,000 people in just 28 days. Now think about that for
7,000 people in 28 days. 7,000 dudes, that's like murdering an entire fucking town. Kids, women, fucking everybody, even the dogs. That's so fucking, bro. There's some towns that don't even have 7,000 people. Fuck, that's like killing like probably 3 entire schools. That's crazy. I think that was more people than 9/11 actually.
For a second. 7,000 people in 28 days. That's 250 people a day. Now, Blokhin and his men reportedly would work 10-hour days nonstop, so that's 25 people an hour, or one person every 2 to 3 minutes. Now, these weren't indirectly through ordering his men, but this was by his own hand. Blokhin had pretty much developed an assembly line of death so efficient it would make Henry Ford envious. Prisoners would be escorted into a soundproofed room against a sandbag-lined wall. Without a word, these prisoners' last sensation would be feeling the muzzle of a German pistol in the back of their neck before being brutally murdered. Wait, a German pistol? I hear you ask. Why would Soviets be using German pistols? 2 words: plausible deniability. Think of it this way: if thousands of victims in mass graves happen to be found with German bullets lodged in their noggins, who do you think's gonna be blamed? Don't look at us, it was them.
Makes sense.
Blokhin's massacre is regarded as the largest mass murder conducted by a single person in known human history, even acknowledged by the coveted Guinness Book of World Records in 2010. Really stretching for content there. It is believed that throughout his career, Blokhin's personal kill count had reached tens of thousands, but his spree would soon come to an end. After Stalin privately passed away in a puddle of piss in 1953, Blokhin was forced into retirement in disgrace. He was ostracized by the public and stripped of his military honors during the de-Stalinization of the Soviet Union. So, of course, he did what any Russian does when they're sad or happy or breathing. He consumed a lot of alcohol, a habit that eventually led to his death in 1955 at the age of 60.
絆の力見せてもらいましょう。チーム対抗戦青ハルカン。新シナリオ開幕。キャンペーン実施中。
Well, dang, that's pretty evil. Sure hope nothing bad like that happens to me.
Hey, it's ad time. Welcome to Crossout, the ultimate post-apocalyptic vehicle shooter experience you've dreamt about since you were a zapping fraction of even dangerous out to below you down. Oh gosh dang it!
Right after the thrilling events of World War I in 1918, the Austro-Hungarian Empire had collapsed. With a little bit of elbow grease and the mashing together of various kingdoms and regions, a new political entity was formed. The state of Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs, home to many Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs. One of those kingdoms thrown in the mix was Croatia, the birthplace of this stern jug of juice, Ante Pavelić. His main personality trait was loving Croatia. God, he loved Croatia. So much so that he made a name for himself and rose through the ranks as a politician and representative in state parliament in order to demand Croatian independence. But this guy, Alexander I, had other ideas. Who's he? Well, he's the Prince Regent in these parts and the one who just got done unifying all of these kingdoms and states. Years and years of political turmoil ensued, which is honestly to be expected when you force a bunch of different political regions together into singularity. In 1929, now King Alexander had hit a boiling point. In order to regain order, he dismantled and banned all political parties, declaring a royal dictatorship. He even came up with a new name for his kingdom, Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia. But since Yugoslavia is not Croatia, Pavelić had it. He fled the kingdom and conspired with revolutionary groups to undermine the rule of Yugoslavia, who responded, "Do you want a death sentence? 'Cause that's how you get a death sentence." And so Pavelić got a death sentence. He was exiled to Germany, but since he didn't feel like dying quite yet, he instead skedaddled off to seek asylum in Italy. There, he used his political influence and persuasive stern look to form the Ustasha, a Croatian nationalist movement aimed at achieving Croatian independence by any means necessary. And you can bet your fat tits that means bombings, assassinations, and uprisings. During said uprisings, King Alexander regrettably stated,
if you want a regime change, you need to kill me.
They did. On October 9th, 1934, King Alexander I was
At that point, you're fucking asking for it. At that point, you're asking for it if you want to get into politics.
assassinated by Ustasha member Vlado Chernozemski using a handgun hidden in a bouquet of flowers. Still living in Italy, Pavlich, along with several accomplices, were determined to be culpable for the assassination and were sentenced to death by Yugoslavia's friend France, who pressured Italy to carry out the deed. And Italy was all, "Linguini fettuccini, we ask a Mussolini." Thanks to his political privileges, Pavlich was only put under house arrest for 18 months. That'll teach him. Right, France? Oh, here we go. Looks like Germany's back at it again, and the world collectively Versailles in disappointment. After the invasion of France in 1940, Nazi Germany invaded Yugoslavia in 1941. This ultimately resulted in Pavlich being installed as dictator to a newly independent Croatia. The mean mustache himself even met with Pavlich and gave some pointers in the art of ethnic cleansing. The only art he ever saw any success in. But Pavlich would soon put this advice into action. During World War II, Pavlich had created his own network of concentration camps run by his beloved Ustasha, one of which being the Sisak concentration camp, the only known camp specifically designed for children. These camps carried out the collection and mass murder of nearly 400,000 Serbs, Jews, and Romani, with an additional 300,000 either exiled or forcibly converted to Eastern Orthodox Christianity, all for the sake of Croatian ethnic homogeneity. Towns were completely ransacked, villages were outright destroyed, and hundreds of thousands of innocent lives were lost. These actions gave the Ustasha notoriety that struck fear into the hearts of anyone who dared cross their path. Nazi Army General Edmund Gleiser-Hochtenau witnessed firsthand the atrocity of Pavlich and the Ustasha, saying, quote, "Our troops have to be mute witnesses of such events. It does not reflect well on their otherwise high reputation. The Ustasha have gone raging mad."
Dude, I feel so bad because you can order somebody to do it, but I feel bad for the person that actually has to do it. For example, the soldiers. A politician can just say like to do certain things to take people out, like these people did. But I feel bad about the soldiers that had to carry out those orders. Just because if you don't, then you're pretty much next. Like you're the one that's gonna get killed if you don't follow orders. That's just how it is. So I feel bad for them, but I don't know. It's just war, so it happened.
That's pretty telling when even a Nazi general thinks you're being a bad dude. After the Axis powers fell, Pavlich got the hell out of Dodge, eventually fleeing to Argentina in 1948, but then some other surviving Ustasha members arrived. After a quick reunion of high fives and smooches, the gang wasted no time in forming the Croatian Liberation Movement. Persistent little buggers, weren't they? They were basically trying to control this from over here. It didn't work. After an assassination attempt in 1957, Pavlich hightailed it out of Argentina, eventually ending up in Spain, where he died of his injuries 2 years later.
Small business owners across the country are using Amazon to pick up, store, and deliver their products. Smell the roses, Julia.
Your crush invited you to collaborate on a trip. Waterfall in love?
So I mean, then the attempted murder did work if he ended up dying from the injuries, but it just took 2 years for them to get to work, I guess.
This is Idi Amin, regarded as one of the cruelest dictators in Ugandan history. He had humble beginnings back in 1946, where he served in the colonial army as a cook's assistant. In addition to cooking up a good steak, Amin was raring to have a job well done in his military career, so
Dude, they look like they would be siblings. I don't know why. They look very familiar. Like, related to each other.
he speed ran through promotions within the Ugandan army, making it all the way up to captain in 1962.
I'm the captain now.
All of this impressive progress received recognition from Ugandan Prime Minister Milton Obote, and a friendship formed. Hey, hi. One that would be fruitful in many shady activities including ivory and gold smuggling. After being threatened with investigation by the Ugandan parliament, Obote overthrew King President Person Mutesa II and seized the position for himself in 1966. The ex-king was exiled to the UK where he lamented over the loss of his country, ultimately drinking himself to death just 3 years later. Poor little guy. After the coup, Obote promoted a now more rotund Amin.
Imagine losing an axe, you can lose money, but imagine losing a whole fucking nation. That's tough. That's like the ultimate power that you can have with a man. I don't know. Shit, I think it will hurt way more.
To commander of the Ugandan army, but all good times must come to an end. Obote himself was a terrible ruler. His regime was plagued with corruption and terror, resulting in nationwide starvation and cruelties toward the Ugandan people. Not surprisingly, Obote had experienced a failed assassination attempt where he was shot through the teeth and out his cheek. The assassin missed, and Obote is pissed, so in response he had any and all political parties banned, with their members jailed for life. Meanwhile, Amin was in the corner doing his own thing, building up his beloved military for less than necessary fighting in neighboring wars. Obote didn't like that, and Amin didn't like that Obote didn't like that, so they began not liking each other. As a personal bitch slap, Obote had stripped Amin of his freshly granted commanding privileges and threatened him with jail time for misappropriating military funds. But this only activated Amin's trap card, prompting a takeover of the Ugandan government while Obote was out and about doing president things. The Ugandan people, having just gone through years of suffering under Obote's regime, were pretty thrilled.
Why the fuck does he have so many medals? He has like every medal you can fucking think of. I don't know why. He looks like a fucking fridge. Like, he looks like he has a fucking bunch of fridge magnets on his chest.
And cheered Amin's efforts. Now in control in 1971, Amin declared that the military would temporarily run the government until new elections could be run. He even promised to free all political prisoners. But he never did. In reality, he flew too close to the sun, taking comfort in its warmth. Just a week later, Amin declared himself President of Uganda, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Ugandan Army Chief of Staff, and Chief of Air Staff. The ego's starting to take over a bit. With this uncontested power, Amin began systematic executions of anyone who, he believed, would oppose his rule. Roughly 15,000 civilians had disappeared, now believed to have been kidnapped and given front row tickets to Amin's newly constructed state-of-the-art torture facility. However, this failed to slake Amin's thirst for blood. He soon expanded his list of victims to various groups throughout the country. We're talking artists, journalists, lawyers, students, senior members of government, foreign nationals, anyone who had even the most infinitesimally small tie to Obote. There were even rumors of Amin being a cannibal, or at least having tasted human meat, though it seems like he rated it 1 star as it was, quote, too salty for him. Human rights organizations estimate that between 300,000 to 500,000 people were slain under Amin's tyrannical rule. Known as the Butcher of Africa, Idi Amin not only
300 to 500,000 people. Yo, holy shit. That's like taking down an entire fucking city. Just killing them. Like, it can just be just a number, but just imagine like 300,000 people. You can't even imagine that much people, dude. I can't like imagine that many faces. 300,000 to 500,000.
murdered his own people, but devastated the Ugandan economy as well. He had expelled around 80,000 business owners and seized their property. So Amin walked up to an African stand and he said to the man running the stand, "Hey, bum bum bum, get out of here or I'll kill you." Then he waddled away, waddle waddle. These businesses, which were basically the country's economic backbone, were handed off to his inner circle, and they all quickly went bankrupt from mismanagement. Edie? More like idiot. Anyway, the businesses accounted for about 90% of the government's tax revenue, so government funds went poof. Yeah, just like that. Amin became blinded with power, so much so that he was unable to see the inevitable brick wall that the country was heading towards. His closest cabinet members, realizing that murdering everyone and crippling an economy aren't really the best long-term policies, started to defect, abandoning Uganda to seek safety elsewhere. Amin even began losing control over his own military. Coups and mutinies were commonplace as officers fought for power. But he had a plan. I have a plan. We're gonna take Tanzania. Alley-oop. He's just not as funny as oversimplified. Uh-oh. Tanzania fought back hard. In order to save face, the former 10-time Ugandan light heavyweight champion Amin had a plan. I have a plan. Yeah, Amin actually suggested a boots to asses 1v1 super slam, but the Tanzanian president had a plan of his own. In the end, Amin was deposed and fled in exile, where he apparently ate up to 40 oranges a day until his death in 2003.
And they're off. Though twists and turns await them, the runners boldly charge ahead, reaching for their dreams. Uma Musume, Pretty Derby. It's go time.
Save up to $1,000 on special deals during Raymore and Flanagan's early Black Friday sale.
Our last stop is definitely no picnic. Now, if this video wasn't satisfying enough, I do have more of these little evil bastards for another video. So if you want me to make it, let me know in the comments. While you're at it, let me know who you would want me to cover. For our last step, if it wasn't satisfying enough, I do have more of these no picnic.
Alright, that's it. Dude, that guy was fucking horrible. He's probably one of the main reasons why Uganda is doing so bad. He set their fucking country back like 40 years by taking out all the business owners.
Now, if this video wasn't satisfying enough, I do have more of these little evil bastards for another video. So if you want me to make it, let me know in the comments. While you're at it, let me know who you would want me to cover. For our last entry, we'll be taking a trip down to Colombia. Now, any of you Colombians out there might be familiar with this guy, but for those of us who don't put cheese in our hot chocolate, let me introduce you to Luis Garavito, perhaps one of the most prolific serial killers in modern history. This guy was a straight-up monster. Appropriately nicknamed La Bestia, or The Beast, Garavito was arrested in 1999 and convicted of murdering 193 children. Garavito's crimes began when he was just 15 in 1972. He had reportedly suffered severe depression, psychosis, and paranoia, allegedly stemming from an extremely abusive and traumatic childhood at the hand of his father. Pairing all that mental anguish with crippling alcoholism and an aggressive personality, Garavito began compulsively forcing himself on young children. Disgusted by his own actions, he had attempted to seek help, attending church sermons, AA meetings, and even seeing psychiatrists, wanting nothing more than to live a normal, happy life. But he was never able to claw himself out of the dark hole that he was in. Look, there's no denying that childhood trauma is tragic, but when you commit unspeakable acts of violence against innocent children, or really anyone for that matter, sympathy kinda goes out the window. Being a victim's one thing, creating victims is another. Moving into the 80s, Garavito's habits had only escalated. He emphasized that his urges to act out were constant and, according to him, uncontrollable. He would impulsively assault homeless children, and to make matters worse, began carrying razor blades and lighters to satiate his growing lust for violence. After each outburst and eventually regaining his composure, Garavito claimed that he would be overwhelmed with guilt. He would write down the names of his victims in a notebook and pray for their safety. At this point, his victim count had crossed above 100. Devastated by his supposedly uncontrollable impulses, he desperately tried to find any answers as to why he was the way he was. He looked to religion, astrology, the occult, really anything that could potentially bring him some revelation. But during this little literary leap, he had stumbled upon a certain notorious autobiography. With each turn of the page, Garavito really started relating to this Adolf guy. I mean, they both suffered abusive childhoods, lived in poverty, are both complete dickholes, you know, that kind of stuff. Luis even went a bit further and began idolizing one Campo Delgado, a Colombian serial killer who had publicly murdered 28 people, including his own mother, in the 1980s.
Bro, there's no way that you have no one to fucking look up to that you look up to a serial killer.
More specifically, he admired the national attention that Delgado received and wanted to experience that firsthand. Now, the 1990s is where Garavito really went off the rails. He was now apathetic in his crimes. He felt nothing. No remorse, no sorrow, nothing. With all emotional ties cut, Garavito's actions hit an apex. Across this decade, Luis committed the mass murder and assault of hundreds of children. In disguise, he lured victims into secluded areas in broad daylight where they were assaulted, stabbed, cut, burned, beaten, eviscerated, and dismembered. After their passing, the victims were often placed in dozens of mass graves scattered across the countryside, with some containing as many as 40 bodies. Now, you can't really hide violence of that caliber for long, so eventually the graves were discovered in 1998 and an official investigation was launched. Because of his continued alcoholism, Garavito's work was sloppy. He would often leave articles of clothing, empty liquor bottles, and various belongings at his crime scenes. Honestly, it's kind of weird that it took so long to get caught, but the mountains of evidence did eventually lead to his arrest in 1999. While being interrogated, Garavito confessed to the murder of hundreds of children. Now, of course, in order to prevent the large, sandpapery, unlubed fist of YouTube from giving my butthole an identical neighbor, I of course cannot go into the nitty-gritty of the crimes. You morbidly curious little deviants would have to look that up for yourselves. But I'll say I didn't warn you. In the end, Garavito's crimes rightfully warranted a sentence of up to 1,853 years and 9 days.
1,853 years, dude. Bro, if you fucking start thinking about it, 1,853 years, how long is that? But I mean, it's not gonna even fucking matter. He's only gonna be alive for probably like 50 more years before he dies. Just execute him at that point. In 9 days. What the fuck added 9 days?
In prison. That's pretty great. Except for the fact that Colombian law at the time prevented any sentence from being longer than 40 years. And get this, since he had given a full confession and even helped investigators find the bodies, his sentence was further reduced down to just 22 years, and the Colombian population was pissed. But luckily, in 2021, Garavito's parole was personally denied by the Colombian president, who vowed that he would never be a free man again. And he never was. Luis Garavito was diagnosed with eye cancer and died in prison in 2023. That video.
Fuck that guy. 2023. He ended up. He killed it. He killed kids for sport. That was his thing. He killed kids for sport. He deserves to fucking die.
It was a real doozy, wasn't it? Looks like you need to clean your mind of all this negativity. So go ahead and click the link below to play.
Dude, that just made me mad how many kids you saw. You just walking down the street and next thing you know, man grabs you and you're done for. Like there's like over 100 families that will have to suffer because of him. Damn. Alright. Anyways, the amazing video, and I did not fucking like any of these people, I did not like any of these people, especially the one guy in Uganda. 300,000 people, 500,000 people. That was the range that they gave us. That's so much fucking worse than the last guy. Wait. Forgot to press record. Press record. Anyways, on to the next one. That was 20 minutes, dude.
The bespoke AI Family Hub Plus refrigerator with AI vision inside.
It is.
Right now we're recording though, so we have to get it. So we're gonna be reacting to how Lee Kuan Yew built Singapore, the world's most. So we're gonna be watching how Lee Kuan Yew built Singapore, the world's most successful dictatorship, by Fat Rat.
It is August 9th, 1965. This is Lee Kuan Yew. He has just learned that Singapore, his territory, has been kicked out of Malaysia. Now he must deliver the news to his citizens, live on national television.
You know, every time we look back on this moment when we signed this agreement which severed Singapore from Malaysia, it will be a moment of anguish. I mean, for me, it is a moment of anguish because all my life.
But he cannot continue. His voice cracks. He stops. He cries.
I had believed in Malaysia, in merger.
Why did this happen? Because Kuala Lumpur, capital of the Malay Muslim majority Malaysia, is afraid of Singapore. Afraid because it's a Chinese majority island. Afraid because one day its port might shine brighter than its own. So Malaysia expels Singapore, out of convenience. For Lee, this is devastation. Half of Singapore's water comes from Malaysia. 90% of its food is imported across the causeway. Without Malaysia, Singapore is finished. A speck of land with no farmland, no oil, no minerals, no industry. At this time, Singapore is just a slum-ridden, overcrowded port. 75% of families live in shacks or squatter huts without toilets or running water. Families cook over charcoal, share filthy standpipes, and queue for public toilets. More than half the population cannot read. Ethnic riots between Malays and Chinese erupt in the streets, leaving bodies in the gutters. This is the country Lee must lead. A country that looks less like a nation and more like a failed state waiting to collapse. And yet, unbeknownst to him, these tears are not the end. They are the beginning of one of the greatest comebacks in history, because the man crying on television that day refused to surrender.
Today, this is a modern city. 10 years from now, this will be a metropolis. Never fear.
From this insignificant port, Lee Kuan Yew will begin to fight corruption, move the poor from slums into homes, and open the island to foreign investment. He will design a bureaucracy so strict that even spitting on the ground or chewing gum could land a citizen behind bars. Through iron discipline and relentless order, he will forge one of the richest nations on earth. So rich and so well-governed, it will become a textbook model of how to build a country. He would build a city richer not just than Kuala Lumpur.
Just imagine like someone writes a novel, just a book like, yeah, how to make a country be good. Fuck it. Whatever he fucking did, I don't know what he did yet, but Singapore nowadays is one of the best Asian countries in the world, so fuck it, dude. It's amazing.
But then Malaysia itself, cleaner than London, safer than New York. At his peak, Lee Kuan Yew is so respected by the world, so feared, that he dares to fine the United States for spying on him.
We caught an American CIA agent trying to subvert our intelligence special branch officer. Man was caught, locked up. When I told the American government, we keep quiet, you take this man away, $100 million to the Singapore government for economic development.
And America pays. He even dares to call Australia the white trash of Asia for relying only on raw exports, and Australia listens. Because on that day, Lee discovered something. Singapore may not have resources, but its people were its resources. This is Lee Kuan Yew, the man who made Singapore.
The man who made Singapore.
Small business owners across the country are using Amazon to pick up, store, and deliver their products.
Yeah, good boy.
Hot diggity dog, John.
For 6 weeks after his speech on national TV, Lee Kuan Yew disappears. He locks himself inside Changi Cottage. He cannot eat, he cannot sleep. Doctors prescribe him tranquilizers. Parliament itself hangs in limbo, not knowing what to do. But even in despair, he writes to the British Prime Minister Harold Wilson, "Do not worry about Singapore. My colleagues and I are sane. We are rational people, even in our moments of despair. We will weigh all possible consequences before we make any move." After 6 weeks of recovery, this is the political chessboard Lee has to deal with. a tiny port with no army, no food, no natural resources, surrounded by enormously larger, possibly hostile neighbors. Diplomacy comes first. The world must recognize Singapore before it disappears. Within a month, Lee pushes his country into the United Nations and wins acceptance. But the region around Singapore is dangerous. In March 1965, 2 Indonesian Marines bombed Singapore's McDonald House, killing 3 civilians and injuring 33. The attack is part of Konfrontasi, President Sukarno's violent campaign against the new Federation of Malaysia, of which Singapore was briefly also part.
First of all, I'm surprised Singapore even has a fucking McDonald's in the 1960s. Now I'm curious how old fucking McDonald's is. They have a fucking Singaporean McDonald's. But also, why would you bomb a McDonald's? It's a fast food restaurant, man.
Singapore captures the bombers, tries them in court, and sentences them to death. In Singapore, they are terrorists. But in Indonesia, they are soldiers following orders. Heroes, executing them inflames nationalist anger in Jakarta, where students stormed the Singapore embassy. So Lee, desperate to stabilize relations with the Indonesian giant, personally flies to Jakarta. At the graves of the 2 Marines, he bows and scatters flowers. He is not here to apologize. It is humiliating, but necessary. Singapore needs Indonesia to be its partner, not its enemy. By 1967, Lee co-founds ASEAN with Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines. Singapore is no longer alone. Now it cooperates with its neighbors. Militarily, the island is without troops. The British are leaving. Indonesia and Malaysia could one day turn hostile again. So in 1967, Lee creates the National Service. Every young man must serve. For training, he secretly turns to Israel, a small country like his, which he admires for having defeated its much larger Arab neighbors with a smaller, disciplined army. Israeli advisors build the doctrine of the new Singapore Armed Forces. By 1971, 16,000 men stand ready. Lee's rule is blunt. If you cannot defend yourself, no one else will. Now that Singapore is recognized by the world, has ties with its neighbors, and can defend itself, Lee turns inward. And the greatest threat here is not just poverty, it is race. Chinese, Malays, Indians. These groups often clash violently. Lee declares that all races are...
See, I don't want to be like disrespectful, but if you're living in Singapore, bro, you're both Asian. You guys will look the same. That's the whole fucking thing with them. They will most likely look very, very similar. The same with Hispanics. Like the colors, we might look different, but most of us kind of look similar.
Are equal, but the state will set the boundaries. He makes 4 official languages: Chinese, Malay, Tamil, and English. Every child can learn their mother tongue, but must also learn English, the common language that will unite them. Religion, too, is tightly controlled. Any attempt to spread faith in ways that could cause division is forbidden. The economy, however, is still collapsing. To fix it, Lee brings in Dutch economist Albert Winsemius. His advice is blunt: forget ideology. Forget nationalism. If you want Singapore to succeed, make it irresistible to foreign companies. Keep taxes low, fight corruption, guarantee stability. Clean the island from top to bottom. No rubbish, no riots, no slums. Build factories, train your workers. If you do this, multinationals will come. Lee listens. With the influx of...
That's the best fucking advice you can give a nation. I'm pretty sure that's what is happening in El Salvador right now, is that if you invest in it, you're pretty much a citizen. You can be a citizen by investment, so that's fucking amazing. And I'm pretty sure like the taxes for outside businesses are lower there. Like recently. Well, I might be wrong, so you might have to do some research on that.
Foreign money, factories rise. American and Japanese giants arrive. Texas Instruments, Hewlett-Packard, General Electric. The dockyards the British abandoned become shipyards. Lee funnels resources to create Singapore Airlines and Neptune Orient Lines. The education system is instantly reoriented to produce engineers, technicians, and workers who can serve these companies. With the earnings from these investments, Lee transforms daily life. 3/4 of Singaporeans still live in slums and huts, so he supercharges the Housing Development Board, the nation's public housing. Hundreds of thousands are moved into concrete apartments with running water and electricity every year, giving every family a stake in the nation. To pay for it, he forces workers to deposit around 20% of their wages into the CPF, Central Provident Fund. On paper, it is for their retirement. In reality, it becomes a giant pool of national capital used to build housing, finance infrastructure, and fund investments.
Okay, but how do they end up actually paying the workers that put it into the retirement? Because they think that it's for retirement, but it's actually for. Is that what the U.S. does with us? I think that shit. Is that what the United States does? He does the same thing. Put it into a retirement fund and then just use the money to like invest in every other fucking project. I wouldn't really be mad, honestly. If it's like for a good cause, I wouldn't be mad. But if it's to send money to fucking Ukraine or some shit like that, I don't know. Then it's like a different problem.
But notice, he never diverts money into welfare handouts. No subsidies. Every citizen must stand on their own. To have an efficient apparatus that can manage all this, Lee doubles the salaries of ministers and civil servants to enhance their commitment, then unleashes the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau, CPIB. Anyone caught taking bribes goes to jail. When his own Minister for National Development, Tay Cheng-wan, is caught taking $1 million in bribes from 2 private companies, the CPIB moves in immediately. Before he can stand trial, Tay swallows pills and kills himself. Lee's reaction is cold. He has done wrong. He has received bribes. I cannot save him. No one is above the law. Even a loyal minister like him is expendable, because if we accept one exception, then everyone will do it. Finally, Lee launches the Garden City campaign. He orders trees planted along highways, rivers cleaned of sewage, and parks carved into the city. Cleanliness and greenery become propaganda, a signal to the world that Singapore is no longer a slum.
Your connections to the past are waiting. Get Ancestry DNA for only $39.
Hello, I'm your child and I'm in prison. Why are you scamming me?
Saving for a trip to Vegas.
By the early 1970s, in just a few years, Singapore has a flag, an army, an economy, and a propaganda machine blasting one message: Singapore is rising. In the 1970s, Lee Kuan Yew shifts to expansion. Factories are not enough. He builds Changi Airport, opened in 1981, instantly ranked among the best in the world. The port of Singapore grows into one of the busiest on Earth, a crossroads between Asian exports and Western markets. Singapore Airlines, launched in 1972, becomes a global symbol of luxury and efficiency. Foreign electronics, shipping, finance, and technology all flow into Singapore, first to expand, then to reach the rest of ASEAN. But growth is never enough without order. Chewing gum, banned, drug traffickers.
$1,000. $1,000 for chewing gum. Yeah, I wouldn't fucking risk even buying gum at that point.
Hanged, littering, spitting, jaywalking, fined thousands of dollars. Opponents, bankrupted by lawsuits or detained without trial. Press, controlled, censored. Lee's philosophy is brutal. We decide what is right. Never mind what the people think. His foreign policy is just as ruthless. In the 1970s, the American CIA tries to infiltrate Singapore's intelligence service. Lee exposes them publicly, humiliates Washington, and fines the United States $100 million. And America pays. He calls Australia the white trash of Asia for living off raw exports. He dismisses India as a nation of unfulfilled greatness. And he warns Africa, corruption will destroy you. At the same time, he balances East and West. Singapore hosts American warships in its port, but also opens to China. When Deng Xiaoping launches reforms in 1978 to open China to the world, he studies Singapore as the model to copy. The world's most populous nation now learns from one of the smallest. Inside Singapore, Lee engineers society itself, Housing quotas force Chinese, Malays, and Indians to live side by side. English becomes the language that unites them. The Stop at Two campaign discourages families from having more than 2 children, until Lee realizes it is pushing the country toward rapid aging. Long-haired men are banned from public service. Women are pushed into schools and jobs.
If you have long hair, you can't work.
He even suggests that only smart women should reproduce, while the poor should sterilize themselves. Lee is not just making policies, he is manufacturing.
Dude, you can't reproduce, you're a fucking idiot. That's what he's pretty much saying to them. You can't fucking reproduce, you're a fucking moron. Only the smart people can reproduce. If you don't have a certain IQ, you can't reproduce.
Singaporeans, but his toughness is not an accident. He grew up with a gambler father who squandered the family's money. His mother, not his father, held the family together. In 1942, he watched the British Empire collapse in just 70 days in Singapore to the Japanese army. The shock never left him. In 70 days, the British Empire was finished. I decided then, no one will push Singapore around again. Under the Japanese, he narrowly escaped the Sukching massacres, when tens of thousands of Chinese men were rounded up and executed. He survived by pure luck, told to fetch his clothes, then spared by a different guard. To survive, he learned Japanese, adding it to his English, Malay, and Chinese. He even tried to sell glue during the war before becoming the top student of his generation. These scars taught him, never depend on anyone, never trust chance. Everyone must stand on their own. And the results prove him right. By the year 2000, Singapore's GDP per capita is $24,000. Already matches Canada, $24,000, and France, $22,000. By 2024, it reaches $90,000 per person, higher than the United States' $85,000, and far above its neighbors, Malaysia, $12,000, and Indonesia, $5,000.
Damn, they're doing better than fucking United States. How big are they?
Education, Singapore ranks at the top of the OECD PISA tests, beating Finland, Japan, and South Korea in math, science, and reading. A country with no resources has become an intellectual and financial hub, but the cost is freedom. And Lee's defense to this is blunt.
I'm accused often of interfering in private lives of citizens. Yes.
In his last years, Lee is walking through the garden city he created. Time made him frail. By the 2010s, his health declines. And in March 2015, he dies at the age of 91. At his funeral, almost 2 million Singaporeans line up in the rain to say goodbye to the dictator who gave them hope. This is Lee Kuan Yew, the man who made Singapore.
Dude, I'm feeling emotional, bro. That shit was sad. Like, man, what a guy. What a fucking great leader, dude. He died at 91 years old. I mean that at 91 years old, but like the nation fucking up. 2 million people to come watch you, like, your funeral. That's amazing. That means that people actually do fucking love you. If you're a leader of a nation and no one shows up to fucking on your sorry. If you're a leader of a country and no one shows up to your funeral, you're pretty much a fucking horrible human being at that point. I wonder how many people showed up to, I don't know. Did Hitler even have a funeral? I wonder if people showed up to his funeral. Most likely, yeah. Probably soldiers or some shit like that, but still. 2 million people that love that guy. Lee Kuan Yew. Anyways, next video. Rest in peace, and honestly, hopefully many nations can take learn a few things from that president or that dictator that did his shit. Because Singapore today is a fucking massively successful country. But yeah. Alright. Let's get one more video down. One more video.
At Bay Fortis, we know babies are full of surprises, but serious RSV doesn't have to be one of them. Severe RSV is uncommon.
We're just so happy.
But it is also the #1 reason babies under 1 wind up in the hospital.
We're just so worried.
So before RSV,
Picture every
Alright. Wait. Start recording. So we're going to be... Oh my god. So we're going to be reacting to why no military on Earth could survive invading... Oh my god. So we're going to be reacting to why no military on Earth could survive invading the United States by Lower Made Casual. Can't speak these fucking accents.
Every country as a medieval castle, complete with towering walls, secret traps, and all sorts of defenses to protect the crown. In this scenario, the United States stands out as the toughest castle in the world. So, when someone asks, what would it really take to invade the United States? It opens up a fascinating conversation about how geography, demographics, and military strength come together to make the US one of the hardest countries to invade in modern history. But to understand why invading America is so difficult, we need to start with what makes invasions successful in the first place. Military historians point to several key factors: the element of surprise, manageable supply lines, and crucially, the ability to establish a foothold and expand from there. It just so happens that America's unique geographic position eliminates almost every advantage that has made invasions in the past possible. Let's start with the most obvious barrier, the oceans. The United States sits between two of the world's largest bodies of water. The Atlantic Ocean stretches roughly 3,000 miles to Europe, while the Pacific spans an even more formidable 5,000 miles to Asia. But it's not just about distance. It's about what that distance means for a would-be invader. You see, modern naval warfare depends heavily on supply chains, fuel, and the ability to maintain communication across vast distances. Any naval force attempting to cross either ocean to invade America would be operating at the extreme limits of its logistical capabilities. Consider this. The D-Day invasion, one of the most successful amphibious assaults in history, involved crossing just 100 miles of the English Channel. Roughly speaking, it required approximately 156,000 Allied troops, around 5,000 ships, and months of preparation, all supported by established bases in Britain. Now imagine scaling that operation across 3,000 to 5,000 miles of open ocean, with no friendly territory to stage from. The logistics behind such an invasion become even more daunting when you consider detection. Modern satellite surveillance, radar networks, and maritime patrol aircraft make it virtually impossible to move large naval forces without anybody noticing. Any invasion fleet would be spotted days, if not weeks, before reaching American shores, giving US forces more than enough time to prepare defensive positions. But what about launching an invasion from neighboring countries? After all, the United States shares borders with Canada and Mexico. Surely that creates vulnerability, right?
Canada or Mexico will be fucking retarded to try to invade the United States. I mean, they have before, but it was like different wars and it was different times. Nowadays, it'd be suicide if you try to invade the United States. I don't think any country is able to invade the United States. Just because there's no one that can compare to like the advantages the United States fucking has. Not even China. Not even China, because China shares like borders with a lot of countries. There's too many spots that can be open. The United States, okay, you have Mexico and Canada, but they're allies. So that will never happen. You will need like 70 different countries to just go against the United States so that they can be overwhelmed. So then you do have a chance. But even then, the fucking people will just fight back. It's not even the military. At that point, once you go to a town, you're going to have to be worried that... No. Once you go into a town, if you're in Florida, you're getting shot in the fucking head. There's no saving you.
Unfortunately for any invader, they're deeply integrated into American military and economic systems, Canada is a NATO member and one of America's closest security partners. Mexico, while not in NATO, has extensive military cooperation agreements with the US and depends heavily on American trade. For any hostile nation to use these countries as invasion routes, they would first need to conquer or coerce them. In other words, they would essentially have to launch two separate military campaigns before even reaching American territory. This would require force projections of unprecedented scale and would trigger immediate American response. But let's imagine, hypothetically, that all of that somehow became possible. Even then, the geographic challenges are staggering. An invasion from the north would have to cross the Canadian Shield, a massive area of rocky terrain and forests, then navigate the Great Lakes region. The US military could easily cut supply lines by controlling key transportation hubs like Winnipeg or Thunder Bay, effectively isolating any northern advance. From the south, invaders would face a large concentration of American military power. Recent deployments have placed thousands of American troops along the Mexican border. Any large-scale military movement would once again be detected immediately, and the attacking force would have to advance through some of the most challenging terrain in North America, including the Sonoran and Chihuahuan deserts. But here's where America's defensive advantages become even more pronounced. Let's say the invading force somehow established a foothold on American soil. They would immediately confront what you could call a natural defensive line. The United States is essentially divided by a series of geographic barriers that would force any invading army to fight for every mile of advance. The Rocky Mountain chain runs like a spine through the western part of the country, creating natural choke points that favor America. The Mississippi River system divides the country into distinct regions, each requiring separate river crossings under fire. Military history shows us how devastating river crossings can be. During the Civil War, battles like Fredericksburg and Antietam demonstrated the enormous casualties that result from forced river crossings against prepared defenses. Now imagine attempting such crossings against modern military technology, precision artillery, air support, and guided munitions, all directed by satellite.
If you even think about putting a fucking, like, I don't know, massive ship down in, like, the Gulf of, what do you call it, Gulf of America, even if you have, like, an enemy ship there, it's getting fucking bombed to pieces. If you get a boat, like a military boat, in the Mississippi rivers, dude, that shit is going to get blown up. What the hell?
Light surveillance and real-time intelligence. There is absolutely no shot of sustaining an invasion in this case. But perhaps America's most unique defensive advantage is its civilian population, specifically its relationship with firearms. The United States has the highest rate of civilian gun ownership in the world, with 120.5 firearms for every 100 civilians. To put that into perspective, Switzerland only has 27.58 firearms for every 100 civilians. This creates a scenario that military planners would probably call a strategic nightmare.
Wait, if they have 127 for 100 people, that means that there's people out there that have, like, multiple guns. Yeah, I don't think we're getting invaded fucking ever. If the United States were to collapse, it would be internally, not from another country. It would have to be like a massive civil war, which could happen one day, but hopefully not.
It's one thing to defeat a conventional army. It's different to occupy a territory where a significant portion of the civilian population is armed and more than likely hostile. History provides sobering examples of what this looks like. The Soviets in Afghanistan, the Americans in Iraq, and various other occupations throughout the 20th century demonstrate that even the world's most powerful militaries struggle against determined civilian resistance.
So imagine them cruising by Old Block. It's gonna be a fucking entire shootout. They're not making it out of it. They're not gonna make it out of fucking Old Block, man. Fucking K-Town. Some fucking parts of fucking the US, bro. They're not making it out of fucking, I don't know, Detroit, Michigan. There's some cities out there that are just horrible.
About 72% of American gun owners cite protection as their primary reason for ownership, suggesting a population already mentally prepared for defensive scenarios. Then there's the simple matter of scale. The United States covers approximately 3.7 million square miles, making it the third largest country in the world by land area. It is larger than Australia, which has an area of about 2.9 million square miles. The US is more than twice the size of the European Union, which covers around 1.7 million square miles. Additionally, the US is roughly comparable in size to the entire continent of Europe, which has an area of about 3.9 million square miles. The distances involved are shocking from a military perspective. The distance from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles is about 2,700 miles. In order to sustain any kind of invasion on America, the occupying force would need to maintain supply lines across these vast distances, while facing constant harassment from both organized military resistance and civilian populations. Modern military thinking focuses on quick and decisive actions, because long campaigns can get really expensive and hard to manage. Given the vast size of the United States, pulling off a rapid takeover is pretty much impossible, and keeping troops in place for a long time would cost a fortune.
So you will need literally, if you think about it, you will literally need every single fucking nation to turn against the U.S. for some reason, for them to even stand the smallest chance. If you think about how big the United States is, you just like think about. If you think about how big the United States is, just think about the idea of taking every single European country, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Sweden, the entire fucking, the entirety of Europe, taking all of those countries very quick isn't fucking possible. It's not fucking possible. Because of, it was possible for Hitler, but for different reasons. They did not have the natural barriers that the United States has. They have too much fucking land to cover. Germany was able to do it, yes, but they had like trail tracks and trains that could supply them. They don't have that in the US. So they would not be able to fucking do it at all.
Consider the economic cost for America during the Iraq and Afghanistan campaigns. Both campaigns involved far smaller territories and populations, but still cost the United States trillions of dollars over 2 decades. The scale required to occupy a territory the size of America would dwarf these figures by orders of magnitude. Of course, there's one last factor: nuclear weapons. The United States maintains one of the world's largest nuclear arsenals, and American nuclear doctrine makes it clear that existential threats to the homeland would likely trigger nuclear response. This creates what is also known as mutually assured destruction. Any conventional invasion large enough to threaten American territory would likely escalate to nuclear conflict long before achieving its objectives. This reality fundamentally changes the calculus for any potential adversary that is thinking about invading America. So, to return to our original question, what...
So imagine if a city like, I don't know, if a city like Boston or let's say New York City, if many of those cities were to get bombed from let's say, I don't know, let's say give me country. Let's say it's Sweden. If we were to get like bombed by Sweden by atomic weapons, bro, their entire country turning into fucking the bro. I can't speak. Let's say that we have Sweden bombing New York City or Boston. After the attack is over on Boston or New York City, or even both at the same time, the entire of fucking US will send atomic missiles. No. Yeah. The other parts of the US will send atomic missiles all the way up to fucking Sweden if they were the ones who was attacking, and they will make it a fucking desert. All you will have left is just shit ton of glass floors and burned grass. There will be nothing fucking left. Every single fucking citizen will be dust if they do that to the U.S. That's a promise.
What would it really take to invade the United States? The answer to that question reveals why no serious military strategist considers a conventional invasion of America a viable option. It simply just wouldn't be worth it. But what do you think? Where do you think America stacks up in terms of national defense? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Bro, if you talk about invading the U.S., that's where that one saying, like, if you can't beat them, join them. That's where that saying comes from, because you cannot fucking beat the U.S. But you can join them, so you can be allies with the U.S. So that would be a good idea. But anyways, amazing video, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Because I'm gonna stop recording because I'm gonna edit these videos and I'm gonna watch my show, as I should. We'll see you guys in the next one, and peace out.